This is a foolproof recipe for homemade bread, plus a fun little thing to do when you got spare dough. Hey guys, welcome to my kitchen. Today we're gonna make one of my favorite things of all time. It's a foolproof recipe of how to make homemade bread. Now there's something so amazing about making bread. Must be like you get your hands dirty or the smell when it comes out. And this is just a way to make it really easy, really quick. And it always turns out fantastic. So let's get cracking. There are very few ingredients we need for this recipe, and the quantity I'm going to tell you today is to make 2 loaves. I'm actually going to make a little bit more than that because I want the extra dough to show you something quite fun to do when you have spare dough, and it's amazing for quick little meals, and it's great to have it in the fridge. You take it out when you need it. So quantities for 2 loaves of bread are 630 grams of water. Here you need to have tepid water because we're going to be using dry yeast. If you're going to get super nerdy about this, 42 to 45 degrees Celsius, the perfect temperature for the yeast. So to the water, we're going to add 8 grams of dry yeast. And once the yeast is in, it's always good to put a little bit of sugar. And the sugar is needed to kickstart the process of the yeast, bring it back to life. It's always good to start with the water because this requires about 4 or 5 minutes to start getting the yeast back to life. So do it first, put it aside, and then we do the next steps. So I'm going to be using a machine today to knead the pasta, but I'm also going to show you how to do it by hand in case you don't have it, because you don't need this to make bread. You need this to make bread. I like to mix 2 types of flours because I think it's going to give like a best flavor to the bread. So I have double O flour, and usually I put 70% of this, and the other 30% we use semola flour. Semola flour is a milling process of durum wheat, and it really does add an extra layer of flavor when you're doing your bread. It's coarser, it gives you that kind of rich yellow color to the bread. It makes the crust look absolutely amazing. So if you have it, use it. If you don't, of course, just do all bread flour, but I suggest you get some semola in your house. So we got our 1 kilo flour. In my case, I put 1.2 kilos because, as I said, we're gonna do a little bit extra. And the first thing you do is that you give it a quick mix. If you have the machine, obviously you put it in the machine, but let's start off pretending we don't have it. And once we mix all the flour, we make a little well in the middle, and we're going to start pouring our water and yeast, which in the meantime has started bubbling. We pour the water and we start mixing it up. And we try to mix as much as possible with the fork before you get your hands dirty. The flour is beginning to hydrate. At this point, you should get your hand dirty. Now, if I didn't have the machine, I would put it on the counter and start working on it. In this case, I'm going to use the machine for a bit so that it does a little bit of the work, but then I'm also going to show you how to knead it on the table. I had the machine running for about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm going to show you for the remaining 2 or 3 how you can do it by hand. You take some semola and we just sprinkle over. And you sprinkle around your hand so it doesn't stick. We take the dough and you put it on the tabletop. Any technique, what you're trying to do is you're trying to stretch the dough. You want the dough to gain strength, to start trapping air bubbles. So there's not any specific trick. You just want this dough to stretch out and fold it back in. And now that we have our lovely bowl, we take a bowl and we oil it. I like to put quite a bit of extra virgin olive oil so that when I mix it afterwards, it gets incorporated with the dough and it's going to taste amazing. So we take the bowl, we just plop it in. Take a towel, we wet it with warm water. Wet towel, and it goes over. Now you have 2 options. If it's a warm day, just leave it outside. It's totally fine. It's going to take a couple of hours and it's going to raise up to double the size, which is what you want. If, like today, it's a cold London day, then one thing you can do is that you put it in the oven. Of course, the oven stays off, but what you do is that you switch on the light. The light alone produces a little bit of heat and is a perfect amount of heat to get the bread to raise by himself. And again, 2 hours. So oven light is on, I'm gonna put it in. Now it's only been an hour and a half, but because of this method with the heat, it's actually managed to double up in size quite quickly. And unfortunately got a little bit stuck. We'll try our best. Anyway, you can see it's quite doubled. And this is where you get a little bit violent with your dough. You just give it a whack and it deflates. Now a little bit more sprinkle on the worktop so it doesn't stick. And we throw this down. Oh, it's beautiful. It's nice and warm. It smells great. And once it's in a countertop, we just give it a quick knead. And this also helps to amalgamate the oil that we put on the side. And this is our beautiful dough. Now, Next steps, we're gonna use this baking tins, and we take some butter, and we're gonna use a little bit of butter to make sure that it doesn't stick. We just use our hands to coat the tray. Do this properly. You really don't want all this hard work to be ruined because you didn't grease the tin properly and then you get stuck. That would be very upsetting. So we're gonna make 2 breads today. One is for us and one is for our elderly neighbor. And she loves when we make our homemade bread. As I said, we're gonna try to keep some behind. So let's weigh this, 1.9 kilos. We keep that on the side, 800 grams, perfect. Okay, now we're just gonna knead it into a bowl, and then you can use this technique to make it nice and smooth. Or if you don't feel comfortable, you can just put your hands over them and work around it. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. Once you have a lovely smooth bowl, you plonk it in the middle. So we do quickly the same thing with this one. And again, you plonk it in the middle. We have the 2 dough here, and we're gonna let it rise for another hour. And I'm gonna use the same technique. We put it in the oven, we keep the light on, that will create nice amount of heat. Wet cloth on top of it, because you always need to try to maintain a warm, moist environment, and we'll see how it looks in 1 hour. And here we have it. This has been resting and rising for about 45 minutes to an hour. It's looking great, it's doubled up in size. I've preheated the oven at 200 degrees with fan setting, which is the best way to cook the bread. There's no need to put in water or anything like that, so we just open this up and we put our 2 little breads inside. Middle level of the oven, and this is going to be cooking for about 35 minutes, so we'll give it a check. In the meantime, as I promised, we've left some behind, and this is absolutely great because you can keep this in the fridge and you can whip it out whenever you want. It stays in the fridge for 5 days, and what you can do with this, it's something so scrumptious. So you take some more semola. I'm only going to make 1 because if I make 3, I'm going to eat 3 and it's nearly dinner, so you know, put some semola down. Before we do that, actually, let's take a pan on the fire, some cooking oil. You can use sunflower oil, you can use olive oil if you're feeling rich. You let it get to about 160 temperature. You take a little bit of this dough, which now is super lovely and stretchy. You put it over the semola, and nothing fancy, just make a shape you like a little round thing, something like that. And this, we're gonna fry it, and it's gonna be so good, so good. Into the hot oil, away from you. The oil, it's about 160 to 170 degrees Celsius. If you don't have a thermometer, which is fine, what you can do is that you can take a little bit of flour, and if it sizzles like it just did, it means it's ready. So we're gonna leave it to brown on one side, and then we turn it again, probably 3 minutes per side. And look how amazing it started bubbling up, getting fluffy, super moist in the inside. It's been 3 minutes, and we carefully turn it. And if you want to get the chubby sides, just tilt it, put it into the oil. And like this, we can get this golden brown all around it. Oh man, this is so good. This is amazing. If you even spread Nutella on it, if you put it with ham or just by itself, this is just great. So 3 minutes on both sides, and we take it out and we let it rest on some kitchen paper. So when this is still hot, we take some nice salt. And this is actually quite nice, also sweet. So you can do the same process, and then you just put a little sugar on top. Give this a little turn. Here it is. Look at that. Little thing of beauty. So you can make it into little strips. Oh, it's still creamy. And look, see how soft this is inside? It's super soft, still hot. But outside it's crunchy and it's salty. Look how I pulled away. So hot. Let's try though. So good. My kids absolutely love this when they come back from school. Quick fry up. You can put some salami or some olive oil. It's a quick snack. But also for dinner. You keep this dough 5 days in the fridge, whip it out, 2 seconds, you make 5 or 6 of this, And instead of having bread, you have something which is a little bit more, it's a little bit more naughty, you know? 35 minutes have passed, so. All right, so let's take one at a time, careful not to burn. And we take this and we put it in a cooling rack. And it comes out nicely because we were good with our butter. And second one up. Pretty nice, huh? All right, so down the other one. And how do you know if it's cooked? Because if it's cooked, it makes this sound. See, it's a hollow sound. Oh, super hot. Okay. Okay. See, beautifully crunchy, hollow sound. We know it's cooked. So now, patience. 10 minutes, then we'll cut it up. Shall we see how it looks inside? So we'll take one. Oh, nice and warm. So ready the knife. Can you hear the sound? Here it is. Still steaming. Super soft. See, this is what you want. Here's crunchy. But here's soft. So soft. Hear the sound. This is the sound you want. And the reason why you make two is because one, you eat it fresh. The second one, you can slice it. Especially if you've got kids, you've got a big family. You put it in the freezer already sliced, and when you need it, you take the slices out and you put it in your toaster, defrost setting, and you got breakfast, you got lunch, you got dinner. Eli, try it out. How's it?
So good.
Okay, so two things that you can play around with. Like I said, the proportion of the flours, so white flour and semola flour, you can choose. The semola flour has got more flavor, but it impedes some of the rice, so 30% is good. And the second thing is salt. Put salt, don't put salt. In Italy, a lot of the places we don't put salt because we put it with like really salty meats. So we want the bread not to have any salt, but you know, if you like it, just put a couple of pinches. Bambini, volete assaggiare il pane? See, those are happy customers. Give it to Ame. Ciao. Buon appetito.